I want to break down what my post is really saying about the early January 2026 US strike in Venezuela. If you only listened to the official line, you'd think this was basically a giant anti-drug bust with a flag on it. Narco-terrorism, cartels, bad guys. Clean headline, easy sell. But here's the rule. When Washington moves with speed and scale, you should assume the press release is just the wrapping paper. The motive usually lives in the boring stuff. Money flows, settlement rails, energy leverage, and the US dollar's role as the world's default trading chip. The post starts blunt. I'm not defending Maduro. The Venezuelan regime has earned a lot of the hate it gets. The point is not Maduro good, the point is incentives. Power protects itself. That's history, not conspiracy. What happened in plain English? The Post says that on January 3, 2026, U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. This was a major operation, not some in-and-out team. Then, the weird part, almost immediately officials and reporting started talking openly about Venezuela's oil, who would manage it, how it would be sold, where the money would go. That is not how a simple drug bust normally sounds. So either Washington suddenly decided this was the moment for the biggest counter-narcotics flex in decades, or there were deeper strategic reasons lined up behind the scenes. The Post bets on the second. Why does oil still matter more than people admit? A lot of people talk like oil is over. EVs, wind, solar, the transition, fine. Innovation is good. Cheaper energy is good. But the Post makes the obvious point. Oil still fuels global logistics. Shipping, aircraft, heavy equipment, supply chains, petrochemicals, fertilizers. You cannot replace all that overnight, not even close. Then you layer geopolitics on top. Oil is not just energy, it is leverage. Venezuela matters because it sits on enormous reserves. Production can be crippled, infrastructure can be rebuilt. Reserves are the long game, so if you see a U.S. operation followed by talk of rebuilding and controlling the oil sector, you are looking at a strategic asset in play. The petrodollar and why the dollar is really the story. This is where the Post gets spicy. For decades, a huge chunk of global oil trade has been priced and settled in US dollars. That helps keep the dollar as the default settlement currency for trade. It reinforces America's financial reach. Why does that matter? Because if the world needs dollars to buy oil, the world needs access to dollar liquidity. That supports demand for dollars. It supports U.S. debt financing in ways that would be harder for other countries. It gives Washington structural leverage. This is what people mean by petrodollar. It is not magic. It is a system, and systems create choke points. The Post calls them pipes. Dollar clearing, big banks, compliance regimes, settlement networks tied to U.S. jurisdiction. When you control access to the pipes, you can punish rivals without firing a shot. That's the logic behind sanctions. It is why sanctioned countries immediately start looking for ways around the system. Venezuela's shift into crypto settlement, sanctions don't just restrict, they teach. The Post describes reporting that PDVSA and intermediaries leaned into digital payment methods. This includes stablecoins like USDT, especially as sanctions enforcement tightened. It also mentions claims that a very large share of Venezuelan oil payments shifted into USDT at certain periods. The Post admits nobody has a perfect spreadsheet of sanctions-busting flows, but the bigger point is hard to deny. Venezuela was moving oil money in ways designed to reduce exposure to traditional banking choke points. Once an exporter can sell oil while rooting around the old rails, that stops being Venezuela doing Venezuela things. It becomes a test case. Can energy exporters sell without being trapped in dollar-controlled settlement infrastructure? If the answer is even partially yes, Washington loses a lever. Washington hates losing levers. Why USDT-style payments make Washington itchy. The Post is not pretending stablecoins are perfect. They can be frozen, traced, regulated, and crypto is full of scammers. But stablecoins solve one real-world problem. Moving value across borders can be faster. Sometimes it is harder to block mid-transaction than traditional bank wires. In a sanctions environment, that's a feature. Here's the key idea. Even if a stablecoin is dollar-denominated, it is not necessarily dollar-denominated under U.S. control. The Post uses a simple analogy. It's like someone using your currency but refusing to use your cash register. Now imagine that dynamic showing up in oil markets. That is when this becomes geopolitical. China's digital yuan push and why timing matters. Then the Post layers in China. It argues China has been building payment infrastructure and digital currency capability for years. This aims to reduce dependence on US-linked settlement and operate outside Washington's reach. It points to late 2025 and early 2026 reporting about stepped-up digital yuan management and features. This includes deposit-like and potentially interest-bearing functionality. It makes the system stickier for holders. The Post does not claim a signed confession that China's digital yuan made us do it. It says timing matters. Venezuela experiments with alternative settlement. China builds better rails. Then suddenly the US moves and oil control becomes front and center. Connect the dots. Counter narcotics versus control the oil. Spot the difference. The Post says the public narrative leaned on drugs, terrorism, security. Those issues are real. Venezuela has long been accused of trafficking and corruption, so the US did not need to invent a moral argument from scratch. But watch what governments do, not what they say. After the operation, the article notes, talk about controlling oil flows and revenues, potentially directing revenues into US-controlled accounts to drive political change. The Post calls that the ball game. Regime change as an economic tool. The Post argues regime change did not disappear after the Cold War. It got rebranded: humanitarian, anti-terror, pro-democracy, counter-narcotics. Sometimes it's economic. If a country sits on strategic resources and starts trading in ways that reduce US leverage, Washington notices, then uses whatever moral or legal framing is available to justify action. That does not mean the moral frame is always fake. It means it is rarely the whole story. Blowback risk, force can speed up de-dollarization. Here's the irony the Post hammers. If the dollar is dominant because it's stable and useful, it should not need an aircraft carrier vibe to keep customers. When hard force is used to defend currency leverage, it signals vulnerability. It motivates others to build alternatives. That can accelerate stablecoins, direct settlement systems, and CBDCs. The Post's line is basically, you cannot bomb an idea out of existence once it solves a real problem. Incentives remain. Incentives win. The Libertarian bottom line. The Post ends with a warning. If you believe in free markets and voluntary trade, this should make you uneasy. Once governments treat financial competition like a military threat, we are not doing markets anymore. We are doing empire, and empires do not age well. This is Ryan Dickey Thompson signing off for Disruptarian Radio. Question the answers.